As Bonnie drove her BMW down a busy Atlanta highway, she wasn't bothered about arriving home later than expected. She brushed off the delay, chalking it up to one of those infamous Atlanta traffic jams. Compared to the joy Nick had brought into her life, the inconvenience was nothing. Nearly a decade younger than her, Nick was not just a passionate lover, he had an undeniable charm. Handsome, intelligent, and a fantastic conversationalist, he possessed the energy of youth that gave Bonnie a thrill. At 44, Bonnie couldn't help but feel guilty about her secret affair whenever she thought of her husband, Ron. Ron didn't have Nick's stamina, but he compensated with his experience and deep understanding of Bonnie's needs, making their intimate life incredibly fulfilling. After meeting Nick, there was nothing better than coming home and falling asleep in Ron's arms, knowing she had the best of both worlds. Her smile grew wider as she drove away from Atlanta, letting her thoughts of Nick fade. Although being with him was exciting, her heart truly belonged to Ron and their daughter, Katie. Bonnie was eager to spend more time with her loved ones. Now, she felt fulfilled in her intimate relationships, accepting her emotions and knowing she could be patient and loving with Ron, her incredible husband. Their daughter, Katie, was a talented athlete and a capable student, surrounded by a wide circle of friends involved in sports and school clubs. Her friends often gathered at their house on weekends, and Bonnie enjoyed chatting with them. They seemed to admire her as a positive figure in their lives. Bonnie always ensured she was impeccably dressed, being a highly qualified specialist at a renowned architecture firm. Together with her husband Ron, who managed the family's successful business, they were a well-known and respected couple in society. Despite his tight schedule, Ron always found time to attend Katie's school activities. Bonnie treasured the moments when she sat beside Ron, watching their daughter shine on stage or in sports. She knew that many parents couldn't help but glance her way, but she also noticed how many mothers looked at Ron as if he were their prey. Even when Bonnie sat right beside him, women found ways to strike up conversations and flirt with her attractive husband. Ron seemed oblivious to this attention, but Bonnie couldn't ignore it. After a long drive, Bonnie parked in the garage and found that Ron's truck was missing. Stunned by the unusual and unexpected situation, Bonnie felt unsettled. After a grueling business conference and a tiresome trip home, she had hoped Ron would be there to welcome her. But when she entered the empty house and headed to the bedroom, she couldn't shake the feeling of anxiety creeping into her soul. It was almost dinner time, and her family still hadn't appeared. Ron never stayed late at work, and Katie should have been home from school by now. They both should have been there. Tomorrow was Thursday, and their absence only added to Bonnie's growing unease. Bonnie unpacked and headed to the shower, contemplating the mysterious disappearance of Ron and Katie. Suddenly, she realized her phone was off. It had been off since dinner the previous night. Lost in her thoughts on the way home, she hadn't even thought about why no one had tried to reach her. Perhaps Ron was upset because she hadn't called to thank him for the pearl necklace the previous night. She had been so overwhelmed by her emotions stirred by Nick's presence that she had completely forgotten about Ron. After drying her hair, Bonnie turned on her phone. Meanwhile, Ron couldn't help but feel proud of his clever idea to surprise his wife. He had known about Bonnie's upcoming conference in Atlanta for months, as she regularly attended them. This particular conference coincided with their 20th wedding anniversary. A few weeks prior, Ron had been offered a project to build a luxury vacation home for a family in Atlanta. After finishing a business call with a client named Boyd Drake, Ron felt comfortable enough to share his new plan. "Boyd, our anniversary is on the 10th of next month. My wife will be at a conference in downtown Atlanta. I thought it would be a great surprise to treat her and her colleagues to a special dinner at one of the nearby restaurants. To make it even more memorable, I bought a pearl necklace that I'd like to have delivered to her table during the meal," Ron explained. "My daughter could help arrange the delivery of the necklace to your wife. She's in college and knows all the best spots in town," suggested Boyd. "I've got special plans for when my wife returns home," Ron replied. "Why not go to Atlanta yourself and give her the necklace in person during dinner?" Boyd asked. "I've suggested that before, but Bonnie always said she was too busy to spend time with me. Most likely, she'll have a late dinner and head straight back to the hotel to rest before the next day. That's why I want to surprise her," Ron explained. Boyd found it a bit silly to go all the way there and be ignored, but he had another idea. "How about we treat my daughter and her friend to dinner in exchange for a live video on Facebook of them sitting at the table next to Bonnie?" Boyd suggested. "I'd love to see Bonnie's reaction when she opens the box with the necklace inside." Ron agreed, and Boyd said he'd give his daughter the contact details to set up the surprise. "I'm sure she'll be happy to help with that," Boyd assured Ron. Ron ordered pizzas for the 20th wedding anniversary party he was hosting at his house. Among the guests were his parents, Bonnie's parents, his brother and sister-in-law, and Bonnie's younger, divorced sister. Everyone eagerly anticipated Bonnie's arrival because Ron had planned a special anniversary surprise for her. Along with the adults, their 16-year-old daughter Katie and several of her friends were also present. Ron had everything set up for the big surprise. The video was already displayed on the large TV screen. Boyd's daughter sat beside Bonnie, trying not to arouse suspicion, and sent the live video via Facebook unnoticed. She bribed the waiter to deliver a gift to Bonnie and her colleague Sue as soon as they ordered. Ron was eager to see Bonnie's reaction, closely watching the real-time feed. He beamed with joy as he explained, "This will be our best anniversary yet, even though we're miles apart." Ron made sure that no sound came from his end. "Wow, what a great idea," exclaimed Katie when Bonnie appeared, holding hands with a handsome young man. "Who is that guy with Mom? I thought she was going to be with Sue." "I don't know who he is, but he seems to be a pretty close friend," Ron said with a shrug. Bonnie's father made a disapproving sound and frowned at Ron's words. As the couple sat down, everyone gathered around the TV could easily hear their conversation. "Your husband is so generous to have invited us to dinner tonight. I'll make sure this anniversary is especially memorable for you, maybe even more memorable than your honeymoon," Nick said, laughing. Bonnie smiled back. "Then you better order a steak, you're going to need all your strength." "My honeymoon was unforgettable, wasn't it?" Nick laughed. "Well, you didn't have a lover back then, did you?" "I don't think your husband is that amazing," Nick joked. All the while, Bonnie thanked Nick, saying, "Ron did a great job." "Thanks for asking. You're the only lover I've had in the last 20 years, aside from Ron, of course." Fortunately, he's starting to slow down. Nick smiled, reassuring her. "The good news is that you're going to have a much more special 20th anniversary today than most women." "I'll make sure of that, darling." Bonnie, feeling uncomfortable, suggested, "Maybe we've seen enough. This doesn't feel right." "Bonnie doesn't know we're watching and listening. Why don't you turn off the video? We don't want to miss Bonnie's reaction when she gets her necklace, right? Let's see how her dinner unfolds a little longer," Ron responded, his face red with anger. As the couple made their order, everyone heard Bonnie call her companion Nick. When the waiter took away their menus, another waiter approached with a beautifully wrapped package. "Look, Ron probably sent a gift for our anniversary," Bonnie exclaimed. She gasped in delight as she opened the package. "Oh, this is amazing," she said, holding up a pearl necklace. "Would you help me put it on?" she asked Nick. "Of course," Nick responded, carefully placing the necklace around her neck while his hands brushed against Bonnie's chest. "You have a very romantic husband," a woman at the next table commented. "You're lucky to have such a handsome man." "Absolutely," Nick agreed, smiling. "I have a loving husband and a charming boyfriend." She glanced at Nick, but the older women at the table only laughed at her comment. "I gave you a pearl necklace yesterday that I think suits you much better than this one," Nick joked, leaning in to kiss Bonnie on the lips. "That's what separates a husband from a lover," Bonnie smiled slyly. A red-haired girl, who was Boyd's daughter, whispered sadly, "Husbands give us jewelry, and lovers make promises." Unable to continue watching, she turned off her phone, her eyes full of regret. "I should have seen this coming, but I was too shocked to react. I'm sorry about everything, I'll delete everything from my phone," she said, her heart heavy. She stood up and added, "It's time for me to leave." The TV screen went black, and a heavy silence filled the room. One of Katie's friends finally broke the silence with a shaky voice. "It's getting late, it's time to go home." "See you at school tomorrow, if I even go," Katie said, her eyes filled with tears. "Dad, can I go home with my friends?" she asked, needing their comfort. "Of course, honey. We can talk about it tomorrow." "Drive carefully, girls," Ron said, his voice hoarse and his throat dry. Bonnie's mother looked bewildered. "I think we've misunderstood the situation. Bonnie really cares about you, Ron, and she would do anything for Katie. Please, don't act rashly," she urged. The other guests at Ron's house shared their opinions and discussed the problem calmly. After reflecting for a while, Ron came to a conclusion. "I need time to think about everything. Please give me some time to decide my next steps. Everyone can leave now." As soon as the guests left, Ron began packing his suitcase, preparing for his next trip. Meanwhile, Bonnie was overwhelmed by the flood of messages and missed calls that awaited her after turning off her phone the night before. When she checked the notifications, she was horrified. Her sister and mother demanded answers about Nick and questioned her relationship with him. Accusations of breaking Ron's heart and upsetting Katie filled her inboxes, with family members bombarding her with a dozen messages each. Bonnie scrolled through her messages, hoping to see one from Ron, but found nothing. She couldn't stop wondering how her family had found out about Nick and what they knew. Suddenly, she began to question where Ron and Katie were. Figuring out how to get out of this mess was crucial, and Bonnie needed to find out how much Ron knew and what he only suspected. Taking a deep breath, she dialed her mother's number. "Mom, it's me," Bonnie said, bracing herself for the tough conversation ahead. She tried to stay calm and started, "I completely forgot that I turned off my phone last night. I saw that you tried to reach me. Is everything okay?" Her mother's voice was cold. "Everything's fine. Oh, except if you think losing your husband, losing your daughter, humiliating your parents, and acting like a loose woman is normal for you. It doesn't seem to bother you much because you're happy to wear a beautiful pearl necklace from your boyfriend." Bonnie replied that Ron had given her the pearl necklace for their anniversary. "Do you think we're fools? Your father and I understood perfectly what you were talking about with your lover. We're too old not to catch your insinuations," her mother snapped. "Mom, what makes you think I would do something like that? What makes you think I have a boyfriend?" Bonnie asked, fear tightening in her chest. "Don't play games with me, I'm not stupid," her mother growled. "Ron kindly invited us over to witness the grand opening of his anniversary gift for you. He had the foresight to reserve a table for you and your colleague Sue. The scene was quite revealing as we watched everything that happened. You mentioned that husbands give jewelry and lovers give happy memories," her mother said. Bonnie was stunned and asked if she had heard correctly. "Ron arranged with his friend's daughter to stream live from her phone. He wanted us to see your delight with his gift, and then we planned to call and congratulate you on your anniversary," her mother explained, sadness in her voice. "It seems this may be your last anniversary with Ron. Maybe when it all settles down, you can see your lover again," she added sarcastically. "Mom, you know I love Ron. This other man means nothing to me, it was just a way to pass the time." "Those conferences are incredibly boring," Bonnie tried to justify herself. Her mother scoffed. "Ron will be pleased to know that his wife isn't unfaithful, just a bored housewife." Bonnie rolled her eyes at her mother's insult. "How are you going to convince Ron that he's the only man you love when you haven't even convinced me?" her mother asked. "Looks like I've got a lot of work to do," Bonnie responded, her voice dripping with disdain. "That man is the most disgusting thing I've seen," her mother said icily. Bonnie doubted Ron would feel any better after talking with her mother. She remembered her entire family had witnessed her conversation with Nick during dinner the previous night. The gravity of her situation became intensely clear to Bonnie as she recalled her exchange with Nick. Deciding that she needed to talk to someone, she called Katie. "Katie," Bonnie began, "where are you?" "I'm with Morgan," Katie replied over the phone. "She's trying to comfort me as I deal with the fact that my family is falling apart. Katie, your father and I aren't ending our relationship. Please come home so we can discuss everything. By the way, do you know where your father is?" Bonnie asked cautiously. "He moved to a cabin by the lake. I don't think he wants to see you. He was excited last night when he invited everyone to watch you open your gift. His heart broke when you showed up with your lover instead of Sue," Katie responded. "Please, come home," Bonnie begged desperately, hoping to find the right words to mend things with her daughter and husband. Bonnie's heart began to race as she looked around the house. Ron's office was empty, with no laptop or files. Even the closet in their bedroom was bare. Tears filled Bonnie's eyes as she walked through the house, noticing all the missing items. The absence of Ron's belongings only deepened her sense of hopelessness. Trying to distract herself from her failing marriage, Bonnie decided to prepare dinner for Katie. By the time Katie got home, Bonnie had made a small meal, but Katie seemed distant, answering her questions only briefly. Bonnie admitted to herself that Katie had every right to be upset, but she hoped that, with time, the tension between them would ease. At dawn the next day, Bonnie arrived at the cabin by the lake and found Ron awkwardly hunched on a small couch, asleep. The floor was littered with empty beer cans. "Ron, sweetheart, we need to talk. Can you wake up, please?" Bonnie pleaded. Ron slowly opened his eyes with a groan and, without a word, headed to the bathroom. Resigned, Bonnie decided to make coffee while she waited for Ron to return. After a while, Ron, freshly showered, returned to the kitchen where Bonnie was waiting. She placed a cup in front of him, hoping he would finally start the difficult conversation she had been waiting for, but she quickly realized Ron was not interested in opening up. "Ron, I'm so sorry about what happened. I really appreciate the pearls you gave me, they're so dear to me. It's a shame I didn't know you were gathering our family at the house. It would have been nice if you'd told me about it," Bonnie said. Ron responded sharply, "Don't you dare talk to me. Nothing will help our relationship." Ron's anger bubbled over at Bonnie's attempt to make him look like the bad guy. Bonnie, stunned by Ron's uncharacteristic tone, felt the pain of realizing how much she had hurt him. "What problem are you trying to solve? Is it that I surprised you with an anniversary gift at a nice restaurant where I reserved a table for you and your lover? Or is it that my client's daughter agreed to send a video recording of your reaction? Maybe the problem lies in my mistaken belief that you would appreciate this gift. Please, explain so I can understand what you're talking about," Ron asked calmly. "You know what the problem is," Bonnie said firmly. "Why do you think this is a problem?" Ron asked. "You know perfectly well why this is a problem. I told you I was going to have dinner with Sue, but I ended up going with Nick. You heard our conversation and discovered we were sleeping together. That's the problem we need to resolve," Bonnie responded desperately. "So the problem is that, like the rest of your family, I heard your entire conversation," Ron asked, seeking clarification. "Or maybe the problem is that you're involved with other men," he continued, pressing Bonnie further. Bonnie's cheeks flushed as she realized that getting defensive was not helping her situation. "I tried to take care of you on our anniversary. You didn't do anything to deserve this. Now explain why you've been cheating on me for so long, and how many men have there been? Is Katie really my biological daughter?" Ron asked angrily. "Or maybe her father was the mailman," he added sarcastically. Bonnie, clearly rattled, responded, "There's no need to be rude or offensive. Katie is definitely your daughter. Nick has been my only partner since we started dating. Your comment about my past lovers and the suggestion that Katie's father is the mailman was simply mean-spirited. It's hard for me to understand your reasoning. You admit you were unfaithful, but you refuse to admit the extent of your promiscuity," Ron shot back. "You expect me to be polite, understanding, and naive when you admit that you're a woman who goes around cheating? Are you proud of only occasionally betraying me? And what about Nick? How long have you been sleeping with him, and how often? You conveniently left out those details when you tried to clean up your image as a libertine," Ron shouted. "Nick and I were only together intimately 3 times, Bonnie confessed, crying as she finally realized the depth of Ron's anger. "Besides you, he's the only man I've been with since we got married 2 decades ago. We spent 2 nights together at each of the 3 conferences," Bonnie admitted. "Have you been with him anywhere else?" Ron asked. "No, it's only happened 6 times total, and I sincerely regret it." "I owe you an apology," Bonnie replied. "You're telling me a young guy like Nick can only be with you once a night?" Ron asked. "Why did you sleep with another man?" Ron continued, clearly disappointed. "Was our relationship so bad that you had to look for pleasure elsewhere?" Bonnie explained that she had felt bored and vulnerable and that Nick had persistently pursued her. "It's not about you," she assured him. "I made a mistake. It's not about you or our closeness, it's more about my vanity or maybe a midlife crisis. He doesn't mean anything to me, I promise," Bonnie said. "You were in a relationship with a man who meant nothing to you?" Ron repeated incredulously. "It was just an affair. He was attractive, but that's all," Bonnie clarified. "So he's not important to you at all?" Ron asked, continuing his line of questioning. "You're telling me you slept with a man who didn't matter to you? Our neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, fits that category, why not hook up with him?" Feeling foolish, Bonnie replied, "I never said I would sleep with every man who means nothing to me. Nick attracted me with his looks, charm, and accomplishments. He courted me, but does that mean I'll only have intimate relationships with attractive, successful men who pursue me? That, with rare exceptions, makes me an unfaithful wife?" Bonnie questioned. "If you have no feelings for the men you date, then you don't love me either," Ron suggested. "No," Bonnie said, her voice filled with emotion. "I admit I made a huge mistake, and I promise it won't happen again. I love you, not Nick," she added. "How can I be sure of that?" Ron asked softly. At our wedding, and many times since, you swore to be faithful. You're impressive and successful, and men will always chase you. I don't know if I can trust you, Ron admitted. You may not satisfy me in bed the way I want, but don't doubt my love for you. Our intimate moments are special to me, and I feel appreciated, Bonnie assured him. Ron asked why she kept going back to Nick. Bonnie admitted that Nick made her feel special, not just like a mother or a wife. It wasn't love that drew her to him but the thrill of doing something forbidden. Ron struggled to understand why she would do more for a man who meant nothing to her than for the person she claimed to love. Memories of their honeymoon came flooding back to him, remembering how she had promised to love only him. Ron recalled this moment with a sense of bitterness, wondering if he and Nick had secretly mocked him. But Bonnie reassured him, saying, Nick never spoke poorly of you. I would never allow that to happen. However, Ron couldn't shake the memory of overhearing a conversation where he was repeatedly insulted, and Bonnie seemed to agree with the criticism. I can't erase that from my memory, Ron whispered, feeling a mix of confusion and pain in his heart. Suddenly, Ron snapped back to reality and said, Why are we wasting our time here? You found someone new, fine, I guess I need to find someone too. Why pretend you want to stay married? It's pretty obvious you didn't enjoy being my wife, and let's not even talk about that, he confessed. You're beautiful, successful, and smart, and I didn't bring anything to the table. It was only a matter of time before you started looking for something better. I swore to give you a better 20th anniversary than most wives, and I did. So, it's time to move on. Congratulations, you found what you were looking for, Ron added. We can't let this conversation end on such a bitter note. We need to communicate and find a solution, Bonnie pleaded, tears streaming down her face. You can have your lawyer contact mine. Our relationship is over, Bonnie. I'm filing for divorce, you pushed me to this, Ron declared. That day, Bonnie went to work, but in the break room, she ran into an angry Sue. Why did Ron ask me about how you and I went to Atlanta for a conference? Sue asked, feeling betrayed. You know I stopped going after you started spending nights with that Romeo from the Chicago office. I don't want to be used as a cover for your infidelity. Ron called you? What did you tell him? Bonnie asked, feeling depressed. I told him the truth, that I didn't go to the last 2 conferences. I thought you had told him we were sharing a room and attending the conferences together, Sue replied, glaring at Bonnie, feeling deceived. I'm shocked that you would use me like this, Sue said, her tone full of disdain. It won't happen again. Ron found out about my trips, and I think he's going to leave me, Bonnie confessed. What did you think would happen after that? No decent person would tolerate such mistreatment, Sue responded. I was stupid and selfish. I didn't think about the consequences of Ron finding out the truth, and now he's gone, Bonnie said sadly. Don't you realize that your actions when you slept with that disgusting guy from Chicago sealed your fate? Sue replied, her voice tinged with disgust. Sue then spoke more softly. I'm sorry you lost Ron, but I tried to warn you about this outcome. I want you to know I didn't tell him myself, if that's what you're thinking. I understand, Sue. I owe you an apology. I took advantage of our friendship. I'm sorry I didn't take your advice, but I thought I knew better. Ron deserves better than me, Bonnie replied. After learning of Bonnie's infidelity, Ron decided to take a day off work. He moved all his belongings to the lake house before Bonnie returned. He didn't want to hear her excuses or apologies for her betrayal. The thought of living without Bonnie saddened him, but he couldn't accept her callous disregard for his emotions and her lack of loyalty and respect. Her unexpected appearance the next day only highlighted the emotional distance between them. She offered no explanation that would help him forgive her infidelity. The day after meeting with his lawyer, Ron was preparing to leave the office for his divorce lawyer's meeting when a new letter appeared in his mailbox. It was from Bonnie. A wave of indecision washed over him as he wondered whether to read it or simply discard it. After some internal reflection, he decided to open the letter. Bonnie, in her usual straightforward manner, had already answered the question when he read her message. He was overwhelmed by a sense of despair. Ron, I know I messed up badly this time, Bonnie wrote. I made the mistake of thinking I could hide my actions from you and that you wouldn't care. It hurts that you've shut me out of your life and that you don't believe in me. You've always been my rock and stood by my side even in my worst moments. I'm sorry I failed you, but what we shared will always be meaningful to me. I never expected to lose you like this, and I'm trying to cope with it. The letter continued, I realized that my initial statement was hurtful and damaging, and I don't justify my actions. I want you to know that I will always love you. You don't have to forgive me, but I would like you to reconsider and think about us differently. We may never have another chance. You know how much you mean to me, but your actions have shown that you're not willing to do so. I'm sorry that our differences have created this distance between us. When Ron finished reading the letter, he dropped his phone to the floor with a loud thud. Tears welled up in his eyes as he tried to set aside the betrayal and despair. Seeking comfort, he asked his friend Emily to come over and talk. Emily had always been Ron's trusted friend and voice of reason, helping him see things from a different perspective. As Emily arrived, Ron tried to make sense of his feelings and thoughts. He felt a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside him, and he couldn't help but feel he had reached a point of no return. Emily offered him a shoulder to cry on and an impartial perspective on the situation. She told Ron that taking time to understand himself and his needs was crucial and that he shouldn't rush into decisions that could have a lasting impact on his life. As the hours turned into days, Ron began to feel a sense of peace within himself. He realized that although Bonnie's betrayal had been devastating, there was an opportunity for healing and growth. Emily's perspective gave him the clarity he needed, and he was ready to embrace change and start a new chapter in his life. Ron knew his journey wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to move forward with dignity and confidence. As he watched the sunrise over the horizon, he felt a renewed sense of hope and determination, knowing he could overcome any obstacle that lay ahead. Meanwhile, Bonnie realized this had become her new normal. The weekend passed in agony as she reflected on the mess she had created in her life, unsure how to fix it. She had caused irreparable damage to what was once a happy marriage. When Katie returned home Sunday night, she looked downcast. Dad wants a divorce. He can't stand being with a woman who doesn't respect him anymore. I saw him cry several times over the weekend, something I'd never seen before. Do you understand the pain you caused him? Katie informed Bonnie, feeling the full weight of her actions. Bonnie couldn't help but wonder if her lover was really better than her husband. I never wanted to hurt your father. No one compares to him, Bonnie said softly. It was a grave mistake, and I deeply regret it. Your father is truly the most wonderful person I've ever known. Please forgive us both for our doubts, Bonnie added, her voice trembling with emotion. Katie's tone was accusatory. This isn't the first time you've seen this man, is it? You've been hiding this for years. Bonnie realized she could no longer maintain the facade. I slept with him at 3 previous conferences. It was a mistake, and I deeply regret it. I'm sorry, I was wrong, Bonnie admitted. Is that all you have to say, Mom? You betrayed Dad in the worst possible way. Didn't you promise to be faithful when you married him? Did you secretly hope it wouldn't matter? Katie asked angrily. I understand why you're upset with me, but I'm even more upset with myself, Bonnie said, her voice filled with remorse. Your dad is a wonderful man and an amazing father, Katie, Bonnie almost shouted as if trying to convince herself more than her daughter. What I did doesn't reflect how I feel about him. It was a terrible mistake, Bonnie said reluctantly. I miss you, Katie, Bonnie confessed, her voice breaking. Whatever you say, Katie replied coldly before retreating to her room. As their relationship grew strained, Bonnie found solace in her work, but even there, she couldn't escape Sue's cold attitude. Attending Katie's school events only highlighted the distance between them, as Bonnie often sat alone unless accompanied by her mother. Ron's presence at these events only added to her discomfort, as he kept his distance from her. Other parents couldn't help but notice the tension between them, and soon, the news of their impending divorce spread quickly. Bonnie overheard inappropriate comments from both single and married parents, aware that rumors of her infidelity had reached the community. Meanwhile, Ron immersed himself in his work, finding comfort in his business amidst the chaos. Ironically, Bonnie ended up getting half of the business. Although Ron's lawyer tried various strategies to mitigate the situation, Bonnie was shocked when her lawyer informed her that Ron had decided to give her half of his share in the business. It was an unexpected turn of events, especially considering that just a few years earlier, Ron's close friend Dan had made a deal to buy the company during the financial crisis. Ron insisted that without Bonnie's contributions, they wouldn't have anything to live on. The court couldn't deny the truth of his words. Dan, as a silent partner, owned a third of the company, but by transferring half of their joint ownership to Bonnie, Ron found himself in a position where he owned and controlled only a third of the business. Bonnie told her lawyer that this was unfair to Ron, as he was the one who had invested all his time and energy into the business. She suggested that if Ron insisted on giving her a share, she was willing to accept 1/10 of his ownership. This way, Ron could maintain control of the business without potential disputes. However, Ron was incredibly stubborn, and despite her best efforts, Bonnie couldn't get Ron to talk to her on the phone. He had completely cut her out of his life. Meanwhile, Katie expressed a desire to spend the summer at the lake house between her junior and senior years of high school. Bonnie realized that this was another way Katie was punishing her and reluctantly agreed, accepting that she deserved her daughter's reproach. Ron was very pleased with this outcome and carefully planned to expand the cabin, increasing its size by nearly half. With his construction experience, Ron quickly completed the project. By the end of July, the cabin had transformed into a spacious lake house with 3 bedrooms, each with its own luxurious bathroom and a picturesque view of the lake. The modernized interior created a cozy and welcoming atmosphere. To celebrate this achievement, the first weekend of August, Ron hosted an open house at the lake for his friends and neighbors, inviting all of Katie's friends as well. One of Katie's cousins arrived with a friend who caught Ron's eye, a striking blonde who looked amazing in her modest 2-piece swimsuit. Throughout the day, Ron couldn't shake the feeling that she was constantly nearby, laughing at his jokes and flirting with him at every opportunity. When Ron and Katie were alone in the kitchen, Katie couldn't resist teasing him. "So, Dad, did Patty's little bikini tempt you?" Katie asked with a grin. Ron quickly protested, "Of course not. She doesn't look older than 25, and I'm definitely not ready to start dating." "Actually, she's 27, and she seems very interested in you. She's already asking about your age, profession, everything women usually find out about potential partners," Katie said, smiling conspiratorially. "I just met her today. Please, don't even mention marriage." "I've been there before, and once was more than enough," Ron replied. "I'm not suggesting anything, but it seems like she might be interested. I wouldn't mind if you started dating her. She's sweet, and it would be good for you to have someone to lean on while we deal with this breakup," Katie said. "Thanks for the heads up," Ron joked, turning to his daughter. "I don't think a girl as attractive as her would be interested in an old guy like me, but I appreciate that you believe in me," he added with a chuckle. Bonnie's office was located on the top 2 floors of a busy office building in the heart of the business district. Just down the block was a popular Italian bistro that always had plenty of visitors. Every Thursday, Bonnie and some of her coworkers would gather there for lunch. This informal tradition led to them frequently running into familiar faces, as they often saw the same people enjoying a midday meal. Through these casual encounters, Bonnie and her colleagues struck up friendships with employees from other companies in the building. On one busy day, the bistro was packed, and Bonnie's group found themselves without a table. Fortunately, an employee from the advertising agency on the 2nd floor of their building invited them to join a large table. Grateful for the invitation, Bonnie and her group joined the advertising team. As names were exchanged during introductions, the conversation quickly flowed in the right direction. One woman from the advertising group stood out for her beauty and friendly demeanor. Bonnie was drawn to the young woman's contagious good humor. When the other women playfully teased her, a smile spread across her face. "Not all of us have a rich boyfriend with a mansion on the lake," joked Mary, a coworker. "It must be wonderful to wake up with the sun shining on the water," added another colleague. Bonnie remained silent, listening with interest to the conversation. The young woman nodded in agreement and added, "Especially when you have a handsome man by your side. Getting out of bed is never easy." Another woman chimed in, "If it's the same man I'm thinking of, his name is Ron, he picked you up after work last Thursday, right?" "That could be a problem," she noted, pointing out that Ron seemed a bit older than the girl but was apparently in good physical shape. The girl responded with a smile, "Ron is all that and more. He's a kind man and a wonderful lover." Then Bonnie's friend asked the question Bonnie had been avoiding. "Are you talking about Ron Lipton?" "Yes, do you know Ron?" asked Patty. "He's quite attractive, don't you think?" "He was my husband." "I think we should change the subject," Bonnie's colleague suggested, leaning in toward the young woman. But Bonnie declined the offer. "Don't be so dramatic," Bonnie insisted, extending her hand. "I'm Bonnie Lipton." I didn't catch your name. Patty Lawson, the beautiful woman responded shyly. Ron had called his ex-wife a beauty, but Patty thought he was blinded by love. It turned out she underestimated all of Bonnie's advantages. I hope you don't mind that I'm living with Ron now, Patty asked. I can't blame you or him for this. You're a beautiful young woman with an amazing figure. I can easily see why Ron likes you, Bonnie replied graciously. She then added, I wonder why Katie never mentioned you. I can't speak for Katie, Bonnie shrugged. You did a great job raising your daughter. She's smart, kind, and beautiful, just like you. I'm always happy when she comes to visit us, Patty complimented. Later, at dinner, Bonnie asked Katie, why didn't you tell me a beautiful woman moved in with your father? I would have liked to know. I didn't want to upset you, Mom. I know how you feel about Dad, Katie explained. It still hurts that you were unfaithful to him, but I don't want to cause you more pain because of your bad decisions. Patty, on the other hand, is happy with Dad, Katie said. It seems he's finally found happiness again, and strangely, I'm glad to know that Ron is doing well. He's a kind and decent person who should be with someone who genuinely cares for him, even if that woman isn't me, Bonnie admitted. She may not be madly in love with your father, but Patty loves him a lot. She's made it clear that her career is her top priority in the coming years, Bonnie added. She has a strong desire to achieve great success in marketing, Bonnie continued. Mom, when are you going to start dating again? Did you talk to your boyfriend after the conferences? Do you think you'll get along with him? Katie asked. Bonnie confessed, Nick isn't the kind of person I'd want to have a relationship with. He's shallow, a bit rude, selfish, and vain. I only saw him as a distraction. I didn't know he would make my life miserable. Even though I understood his true nature perfectly, I shouldn't be angry at him for my vulnerabilities, Bonnie admitted. Do you have feelings for anyone else? You're still as amazing as ever. I've noticed that parents and teachers admire you and try to be friendly at school events, Katie asked. To be honest, I think Ron has set the bar too high for other men. The circumstances of our separation aren't a secret to society. It makes women adore your father and men see me as an easy target, Bonnie confessed with a melancholic smile. It might have been easy for Nick, but I won't fall into that trap again, she added sadly. Katie couldn't understand how anyone could betray their husband, especially if he had always shown love and respect. What happened? Why did everything go wrong? Katie asked her mother. Bonnie confessed, I've been tormenting myself. A stable relationship was waiting for me at home. Ron was my rock, always there for me when I needed him. I naively believed that he would never leave me, no matter what happened. I might have strayed off course, and he didn't even notice, still waiting for me at home. I hope you find a partner like Ron when you're ready to settle down and learn from my mistakes. Don't take more from a relationship than you give, stay true. Be loyal and honest. If you have doubts or fears, talk about them with your spouse. I am a living example of the consequences of deceit and betrayal, Bonnie said, tears streaming down her face. During lunch breaks, Bonnie sometimes ran into Patty, and to her surprise, she found herself liking the woman. However, Bonnie felt uneasy about how eagerly Patty waited for any news about Ron. Katie, Ron's daughter, was reluctant to share many details about her father with Bonnie, believing some aspects of his personal life were off-limits. Patty, on the other hand, was eager to discuss Ron with her friends. One day during lunch, Patty commented to Bonnie, It's quite obvious that you still love Ron. Patty continued, I never speak ill of you, but it's clear you took his words to heart. I won't judge you, but I have to admit that I could never betray someone in a relationship. It's hard for me to believe you did this, she said. Your actions and words always showed love and respect for him. When passion fades and everyday life begins, it's important to remember that. I strayed, but that's just a part of life, Bonnie admitted. Ron is a reliable businessman, a devoted friend, and a wonderful father. I will always love him, even though I betrayed him in the most unforgivable way a wife can. I've learned my lesson, although it's probably too late, Bonnie said, her voice tinged with regret. Last night, I gathered the courage to tell Ron that I had accepted a job offer in Seattle, and I'd be leaving in just 2 weeks. This is a fantastic opportunity for me, and I hope, in the end, he'll understand and forgive me, Patty said unexpectedly. I made it clear from the beginning that my career is my top priority. This news upset him. I'm telling you this so you can understand his feelings and maybe support him if he feels hurt. He's a really wonderful person, but in the end, he's not what I need, Patty explained. I'm sure he'll miss you a lot, Bonnie assured Patty. Ron doesn't make decisions lightly. If he invited you to live with him, it shows he values not just your appearance but also your character, Bonnie added. He's resilient and faces everything head-on, Patty said. I put him to the test, but he proved his worth and showed his best side. Ron will miss you, but he's a great catch. I doubt his bed will stay empty for long, Bonnie said with a faint smile, expressing her admiration. Patty smiled back. That's why I wanted to tell you first. What you decide to do with this information is up to you. Just a week later, Ron's best friend and unofficial business partner, Dan, asked Bonnie to meet him for lunch at a bistro. The place was crowded, but they managed to secure a small table in the corner. After exchanging pleasantries, Dan got straight to the point. He mentioned the land Ron had bought along the highway next to the river and said there was a potential buyer offering almost $2 million for it. Ron had purchased the land for a nominal sum, making the profit significant. Dan estimated that Ron's share would be more than $500,000. Ron has always believed that the land has great potential for appreciation, Dan explained. But the question remains, will you want to sell it? Bonnie asked, unsure of her role in this conversation. That's the point, Dan replied. He expressed confidence that the company would gain more benefits by offering a long-term lease contract. He suggested specifying in the contract that the company would commit to building custom facilities according to the tenant's business needs. That sounds like Ron, Bonnie admitted, surprised by his business savvy. I'm sure he's crunched all the numbers, and his strategy will lead to increased profits, she added. So, what's the problem? Bonnie asked. I think we should focus on making a quick profit by selling the land. While long-term planning is important, I prefer to get the cash now. You and I each own a third of the company, so if we work together, we can pressure Ron to accept the offer and then split our share of the profits. Ron won't be hurt by this, he'll receive $500,000 in cash to smooth things over, Dan responded. Bonnie felt her frustration growing as she listened to Dan's suggestion. Are you really asking me to betray Ron's trust? Do you really think money is more important to me than his feelings? Bonnie asked incredulously. Let me make this clear, Ron would see this as a major betrayal by his own wife and his closest friend. It would be the greatest disloyalty to him, she added angrily. Even worse than if his wife cheated on him with a younger man at a conference, right? Dan laughed under his breath. You've already become his ex-wife, you betrayed him by cheating, which led to your divorce. This is just another opportunity you need to seize, Dan said, finishing his coffee. Trying to play the role of the faithful wife doesn't suit you, Dan added smugly. Bonnie, holding back her anger, admitted that her betrayal of Ron was stupid and selfish. She acknowledged Ron's superiority and expressed her regret over her actions. I've sworn never to betray Ron again, and I'd give up all my money just to avoid causing him that kind of pain. I realized I couldn't handle being his wife, and now you've shown me you're not fit to be his friend or partner, Bonnie said fiercely. Ron will control my share of the company as long as I'm alive. I'll even update my will so that he inherits my share after my death. Don't doubt his business skills, he knows more than you could ever imagine, Bonnie added, her voice seething with anger as she stood up and left money on the table for her untouched lunch. Then she looked Dan in the eye and warned him not to try this again. Nearly a month later, Bonnie finally opened her front door and saw Ron standing on the porch. She was stunned by his sudden appearance, as he had been avoiding her since she returned from the disastrous conference. Ron, come in. Is everything all right? Bonnie asked, surprised. Katie left just a few minutes ago. Are you looking for her? Bonnie couldn't help but feel a rush of emotion at Ron's unexpected visit. I came to talk if you have time, Ron began, stepping into the family home that had been his for over 15 years. Could you spare me a few minutes? I'm not busy right now, Bonnie replied quickly. I just made coffee. Why don't we sit in the kitchen? Thanks for letting me in so quickly, Ron said, taking a cup of coffee. You always make great coffee. Bonnie smiled and replied, when we first got married, I didn't even know how to make it. It took me a while to get the hang of it. Ron objected. I didn't marry you for the coffee. There were other qualities I found much more attractive. You've never told me what they were, Bonnie said, still smiling. You've heard them, a serious strength, and I couldn't help but be drawn to you, Ron admitted. Patty must have completely captivated you. There's definitely strong chemistry between you two, Bonnie commented. She admires you a lot. Her high opinion of you is one of the main reasons I'm here, Ron said. Recently, one of her friends overheard your conversation with Dan at lunch. Patty told me about it before leaving for the West Coast. She was impressed by your dedication and honesty. I have to admit, I share her view. Even though you mistreated me during the divorce, you stubbornly rejected Dan. Many women in my place would have sought revenge after their husband left them so quickly, Ron said. But I would never do that to you, Bonnie responded. I'm very aware of the dedication and diligence with which you invest money in your projects, and I understand how important they are to you. I have no doubt that you'll be able to earn more from this land than Dan expects. I firmly believe he underestimates you, Bonnie said. Your confidence in me means a lot, Ron continued. Patty helped me accept that you're my equal partner, despite my previous behavior when I ran the business like it belonged solely to me. It's important to you to have a voice and share your ideas, Ron admitted. If you're interested in selling the property and sharing the profits, invite me. Dan is pressuring me. I suspect he needs the money, Ron said. Dan believes that if we sell the land, each of us can get $500,000 without causing any harm, Bonnie responded. What do you think about that? Ron asked. I have a feeling you have big plans for this place that could not only bring significant profits to the company but also earn respect in society, Bonnie said with a sense of pride. You never chase quick gains. Not only are you an experienced businessman, but you're also deeply committed to society. This quality sets you apart from people like Dan, for whom quick profits are more important than making a positive impact, Bonnie added. I heard Dan approached you with an idea, but you refused to support it, Ron said thoughtfully. Ron, I trust you and your decisions completely. You've always earned my trust, and I'll support you in all your business ventures, Bonnie assured him. It might sound strange to hear this from me, knowing you don't trust me, but it's the truth. I've been thinking about Dan's attempts to interfere in your business. It occurred to me that we should consider buying his share. If he doesn't have the means, he might accept a fair offer. That way, he'll be happy, and you can continue running things your way, Bonnie suggested. I've thought about it, but I don't have the money to do it, Ron admitted. We could sell the house. I could rent a nice 2-bedroom apartment for Katie and me. Over the years, we've accumulated significant equity, the house is almost completely paid off, and you've made some major improvements. Thanks to this, we should have enough funds to buy Dan's share, Bonnie proposed. Now that we're divorced, the house belongs to you. Are you willing to sell it and invest in the business? Ron asked skeptically. I'm not sure when I'll be able to close a deal to build an emergency center. I can't promise you'll earn profits from your investments anytime soon or at all, Ron added. Should I be worried? Bonnie asked, her eyes narrowing. Don't forget, we were married for 2 decades. You'll definitely pay me the interest, and if for some reason you can't, it's fine. You owe me one. The money won't ease my restlessness, but it'll help you get rid of Dan, Bonnie said with a smile. If you move with Katie and me to the lake house, I'll accept. You'll have your own room and bathroom, Ron offered. Bonnie replied sadly, as appealing as that sounds, I don't think it would work. It's a matter of privacy. Ron apologized, admitting he hadn't considered the possible drama a new date might bring to Bonnie's life. He understood that having a new partner in the house where her ex-husband lived, especially Nick, would be uncomfortable. Bonnie assured him that she wasn't interested in dating anyone and had made a conscious decision to avoid it, especially after the disastrous experience with Nick. Bonnie pointed out, it's highly unlikely any woman would want to stay with you overnight while your ex is sleeping in the next room. Even if you were in my house, it's doubtful a woman would agree to live there, although I can't completely rule out that possibility, Bonnie added. I've seen how women fall for you, Bonnie said. I ended our marriage because you cheated with that man, and then I let Patty move in with me. My actions weren't a good example for Katie, were they? My only excuse is that I've been battling depression and loneliness, Ron reflected aloud. My self-confidence took a hit when another man took my wife, but Patty helped me regain it, Ron added with sadness. I'm sorry for hurting your ego, and I wish that never happened. I don't blame you for being drawn to Patty, she's a wonderful woman. You're single and free to pursue any relationship you want. I understand that I've never properly apologized for my actions. It was my mistake, and I take full responsibility for it. I ruined everything, and I'm truly sorry, Bonnie said, her voice trembling. I deeply regret the pain and discomfort I caused you, she added, lowering her head. Ron sighed. You hurt me. I've always been devoted to you. I dedicated my life to you and Katie. I went from feeling like I had everything to feeling like a complete failure. Patty helped me realize that, although I may not have been the perfect husband, I wasn't the reason for your infidelity. If you weren't happy with our marriage or our intimate life, you could have told me. I would have done everything I could to fix it if I had known, Ron admitted. I was stupid, Ron, but I wasn't unhappy. You were an incredible husband, a fantastic father to Katie, and a passionate lover. I lost my way, and I believe I deserve to feel unhappy. I find a strange satisfaction in my suffering, like I'm atoning for my mistakes, Bonnie confessed. Why don't you at least come to see the lake house? I'd appreciate your thoughts and opinions on it, Ron suggested. I've incorporated some of the concepts we've talked about over the years in our remodeling projects. I think you'll be happy with the result, Ron proposed. Katie has a volleyball game in a couple of hours. Can I take you up on this offer another time? Bonnie asked. Let's take a look before the game. We can go together. I can drive you there, Ron offered. Aren't you afraid people will think we're back together since we arrived together? You usually sit as far away from me as possible, Bonnie said. Maybe I behaved badly, but in my defense, you didn't treat me or our marriage well either. To be honest, I was more forgiving of you than you probably would have been of me in the same situation, Ron admitted. We both know your settlement offer was too generous, Bonnie replied. It seems like your kindness has served you well. We're considering selling the house to buy Dan's share, Ron lamented. I can't believe you're willing to do this, Ron said. You can take what you want. You've always been honest with me, and I trust you completely. And although I know I deserve it, I know you won't hurt me, Bonnie said, squeezing his hand. Let me show you the lake house, Ron suggested, changing the subject and giving them both time to calm their emotions. When he showed Bonnie the house, she was stunned by the remodel. You really did a fantastic job, she said. Katie's spacious room has a private bathroom that many teenage girls would envy. When Ron led Bonnie to the second bedroom, she realized it was time to address an uncomfortable subject. The room was beautiful, with an equally impressive bathroom, but Bonnie couldn't accept the idea of staying there. I can't live here, Ron, she said. Seeing you every day is just a painful reminder of what I've lost. Let's sell the house, and I'll find an apartment. I'll be fine soon. We have to go to Katie's game, Bonnie reminded him. Ron insisted, let me show you the master bedroom. It's the biggest room in the house, I'm sure you'll be impressed. It's simply incredible, Bonnie said, admiring Ron's work. You always do a fantastic job. Thanks to your attention to detail, your business is booming. Ron asked, if you had this room, would you stay with Katie and me? I can't imagine not seeing you every day. I didn't want the house to belong only to me, I hoped we could share it, Ron explained, his voice filled with clear tension. Bonnie raised her eyebrows in surprise, studying Ron's face. So you're suggesting we share your bed? Bonnie asked, incredulously. Since I found out about your infidelity and left, I've felt terrible. I miss you terribly, to the point that sometimes it causes me physical pain. You made a huge mistake, and while my relationship with Patty eased the pain of your betrayal for a while, it couldn't erase it completely, Ron said. I hope we can overcome all this negativity and restore our relationship. I won't allow myself to be used anymore, Ron stated firmly. If you plan to keep punishing me, I won't tolerate it. If I decide to come back, I'll be faithful to you, and I expect the same from you, no other women in your life. It's either me or nothing, Bonnie responded. I've worked tirelessly to rebuild my self-esteem, and I won't let it disappear, Ron said. I care about you, Ron, but we need to be on the same page. Otherwise, I'm leaving, Bonnie insisted. Katie was almost shocked when her parents suddenly entered the living room together. She quickly approached them and whispered urgently, Mom, Dad, what does this mean? Before she could finish her question, Ron smiled and nodded, overwhelmed with emotion. Katie hugged her mother tightly and whispered in her ear, Welcome home, Mom. I love you, but please don't hurt Dad again. You've always had the desire to improve in this area and, at the same time, earn a decent income. Do you have any plans for this property? Bonnie asked. Ron admitted that he was negotiating with the main hospital to finalize a long-term lease agreement for constructing an emergency care center on the site. It may not be as profitable as Dan's luxury condo project, but it will still bring decent profits and provide a guaranteed construction contract. This project will not only offer employment opportunities but also contribute to building positive relationships in society, Ron explained. Bonnie responded with some pride, "I had a feeling it would be something like that."